Matt Roloff and Karen Chandler separated, and eventually Karen married her new secret boyfriend. Matt and Karen had planned a life together, a dream house, a golden era of retirement, filled with grandchildren and sunsets over the farm. But a promise is only as strong as the foundation it's built on. Sources close to the family revealed that foundation was already crumbling long before anyone knew. The smiles for the camera hid private pain, broken promises, and fundamental disagreements that would eventually tear them apart. Their separation was not recent. It happened quietly behind the scenes months ago. The reason for their split was Roloff Farms itself. But the story didn't end there. While Matt was trying to stay strong for the cameras, Karen had already moved on and secretly married a new man outside the little people, big world universe. Over time, multiple sources have confirmed the details of their breakup, the fights, Karen's new husband, and their secret wedding, as well as what it meant for Matt, his children, and the future of the show. The relationship between Matt and Karen was controversial from the start. Karen had been an employee at Roloff Farms for a decade, serving as manager when Matt and Amy's marriage ended. She soon became Matt's partner. Amy said, "Karen has been part of pumpkin season and I've known her for a long time. To think about them together, it hurts." For years, Amy's discomfort influenced the family dynamic. Fans were divided. Was Karen a loyal employee who fell in love after Matt's marriage ended, or did she play a part in its demise? Both Matt and Karen said their relationship began after the separation, but the perception of overlap created a shadow that followed them for years. Sources reveal Karen was always struggling to be accepted, not just by fans, but by the family. At first, she was Karen, the employee, to the kids. It took time for that to change, and some of the children never fully accepted her. She became Matt's girlfriend but would never replace Amy as a mother. A former employee said this feeling of being an outsider was recurring. While Karen built relationships with the grandchildren and found an ally in Matt, tension, especially with Zach and Tori, was clear. This tension became most visible during negotiations over the north side of the farm. Matt hoped to get the kids involved, saying, "My goal is to get the kids to take it over, but it's a business, and we have to be smart about it." Negotiations with Jeremy, and then Zach became a turning point. Zach and Tori felt the asking price was unfair and disrespectful. Matt felt his sons didn't understand the business reality. Karen's role was difficult. Sources say she was caught in the middle, supporting Matt but seeing the emotional damage. Zach and Tori felt she was influencing Matt and sided with him. Karen said, "I'm just trying to support Matt. It's tough. I know the kids are disappointed, but this is Matt's business, and he has to do what he thinks is right." This conflict damaged their relationship. Karen saw how Matt's stubbornness could hurt those he loved. She worried about her own future and the stability of their relationship. The farm, meant to be their foundation, became a source of family strife. Choosing a side left her isolated. The dream of a big, happy, blended family on the farm was fading, and part of her dream with Matt died too. With the children's plans to buy the farm off the table, Matt pivoted. He wanted to build a custom home for himself and Karen, a forever home on the property. They were excited, but construction was delayed for months due to permits, supply issues, and Matt's indecisiveness. For Karen, the delays were more than logistical, they were a metaphor for their relationship. A friend of Karen's said she was growing weary. Karen is practical and wants to see things through. Matt is a dreamer, distracted by multiple projects. For years, she heard about the dream house but saw only empty land, and it began to feel like a carrot dangled forever out of reach. This frustration started to affect Karen deeply, influencing her feelings about the relationship and her future with Matt. The tension between Matt Roloff and Karen Chandler was visible, if you knew where to look. One conversation now seems like a clear piece of foreshadowing. They were discussing the old farmhouse, the one Amy had lived in for so long. Matt said, "Maybe we could just live in the big house for a while." Karen replied, "No. I've told you I would never be comfortable in that house. That was Amy's house. That was her life. I wouldn't feel right there. We need our own place with our own memories." That statement was everything. "We need our own place" wasn't just about four walls and a roof, it was about legitimacy. It was about starting a life that wasn't built on the ghost of Matt's past. The farmhouse represented Amy's shadow. The dream house represented a true equal partnership, and that house was never going to be built. According to Susan, Caryn's friend, this became a major source of private contention. They argued about it constantly in the last year. Caryn would ask, "Matt, when are we going to do this? My whole life is on hold." Matt would get defensive, listing all the projects he was working on. The new barn, the rental property, pumpkin season. To him, it was all part of a bigger picture. To her, it felt like she was always the last priority. Susan explained that for Matt, starting construction on the dream house might have meant truly closing the door on other possibilities, like one of the kids changing their minds about buying the farm. The house was the final chapter, and maybe he wasn't ready to write it. For Caryn, the lack of a house meant a lack of commitment and a tangible future. She had given up her own home to move into a smaller house in Portland and later spent much of her time at their shared house in Arizona. But in Oregon, she was living on Matt's turf, surrounded by his history. The dream house was supposed to change that. When it became clear it was a fantasy, sources say Caryn began to emotionally check out. The nightmare wasn't the house. It was realizing the future she'd been promised might never happen. By early 2024, their relationship was on life support, according to sources. They were still filming Little People, Big World, and posting smiling photos on social media, but behind closed doors, the connection was fracturing. The primary issue remained the same: the farm and the future. A former employee described the atmosphere during pumpkin season as tense. The breaking point, they say, came in late summer 2024, not one dramatic event, but a slow decline culminating in a final, quiet conversation in Arizona. Caryn laid her cards on the table. "Matt, I can't do this anymore. We've been talking about a future for years, and we are no closer to it than we were when we started. The house isn't getting built. The family is broken. I'm living in this limbo, waiting for a life that's never going to happen." Matt replied, "What are you talking about? We have a great life. We have Arizona. We have the farm. I'm working on it. These things take time." Caryn said, "No, Matt. You have the farm. You have your projects. I am a guest in your life. I love you, but I need a life of my own, not just to be part of yours. I don't want to be the reason your family is fractured, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life waiting for you to decide what you want." According to Susan, that was it. There was no yelling, just a heartbreakingly calm, final realization. They agreed to separate. There was a complication: their contracts with the network and the upcoming pumpkin season. They made a pact to continue presenting a united front for the show and the public until their obligations were fulfilled. So while fans saw smiling images, Caryn was quietly packing her things. She spent less time in Oregon, taking solo trips to Arizona, or going with friends. Matt explained her absence as taking a step back to enjoy retirement, a half-truth that masked the reality. They were living separate lives. Matt focused on the farm, perhaps to cope with loneliness, while Caryn reconnected with a world she had left behind, a world where she was just Caryn, not Caryn from Little People, Big World. In that world, she found someone new, or rather, someone old. That someone was Mark Harrington. Mark is the opposite of Matt in every way. He isn't a public figure, has no interest in fame or reality television, and is a private, successful man who knew Caryn decades ago. They grew up in the same circles in Washington state, were childhood friends, but lost touch over the years. Mark built a successful real estate career, developing commercial properties in Spokane, and spent winters in Scottsdale, Arizona, the same city where Matt and Caryn had a vacation home. The reconnection was by chance. Caryn was spending time alone in Arizona after the split when she heard someone call her name. It was Mark. They hadn't seen each other in over 30 years. They spent hours catching up, talking about their lives and children. According to Susan, the connection quickly deepened. Mark represented everything Caryn was missing: stability, privacy, and peace. Matt's life was full of projects, family drama, and public scrutiny. Mark's life was calm and secure. He offered Caryn something Matt could not. Caryn was hesitant at first, but Mark was patient. He didn't try to replace Matt or involve her in a public life. He took her to quiet restaurants, hikes, and allowed her to just be herself. For the first time in years, Caryn could breathe and feel happy. She kept the relationship a secret, telling only a handful of trusted friends. Eventually, Mark proposed in early spring 2025. There was no grand gesture or TV crew, just a private, heartfelt moment. Karen Chandler accepted Mark Harrington's proposal quickly, feeling a sense of certainty and peace she hadn't experienced in years. She had spent so long in limbo, waiting for a life with Matt that would never fully materialize. Now, for the first time, she could plan a future that was entirely her own. Friends who knew the couple said Caryn seemed lighter, more relaxed, and happier than she had in a decade. The relief was almost tangible. After years of tension, arguments, and the constant pull of the farm and cameras, she was finally free. The wedding itself was quiet and intimate. It wasn't held at Roloff Farms, with pumpkin patches or cameras or a crew capturing every moment. It wasn't a media spectacle or a reality show episode. Instead, it was in the backyard of Mark's parents' home in a peaceful suburb of Scottsdale, Arizona. There were fewer than 30 people present, and everyone there understood the significance of the day. It was about Caryn and Mark starting a new life, not about creating content or pleasing an audience. The guest list was carefully curated. Caryn wanted only those who truly mattered and who would support this fresh start. Her closest friends were there, as well as a few family members who had remained neutral in the years of Roloff drama. Surprisingly, Amy Roloff and her husband, Chris Merrick, were present. Amy was reportedly emotional, quietly wiping tears during the ceremony, torn between happiness for Caryn and the reality of how things had unfolded with the family. It was a moment of grace and forgiveness, even in a story riddled with tension. Matt Roloff was not invited, nor were Jeremy, Audrey, Jacob, or Molly. Sources suggest this was intentional to avoid inflaming an already fragile family dynamic. There were still unresolved feelings from the farm disputes and other lingering disagreements, and Caryn wanted to ensure her wedding remained a sanctuary, untouched by old conflicts. Tori and Zach Roloff's drama, with their own family issues, was also entirely separate, but it underscored just how complicated relationships within the Roloff family had become. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. According to an attendee who spoke anonymously, there was an air of quiet joy, combined with an emotional undertone that reflected years of struggle, heartache, and patience. When Caryn and Mark exchanged vows, Caryn spoke of finally finding someone who saw her completely, not as a stepmother, a girlfriend, or a TV personality, but as Caryn herself. She described the relief of feeling safe, understood, and respected, and how Mark had given her a new sense of identity and confidence. Mark, in turn, expressed gratitude for her trust and vulnerability, promising to support her, respect her past, and embrace her future alongside him. The ceremony ended without fanfare. There was no media coverage, no viral clips, no reality cameras documenting the moment. It was intentionally private. The couple enjoyed a small reception with close friends, a modest meal, and quiet conversations. The emphasis was on celebration, reflection, and the start of a life untethered from past obligations and constant public scrutiny. Caryn reportedly smiled in a way she hadn't smiled in years, free from the pressures of Roloff Farms and the realities of being in the public eye. Back in Oregon, Matt Roloff faced the aftermath differently. According to sources, he was deeply hurt by Caryn's marriage. Friends described him as feeling betrayed, not necessarily by her choice, but by how quickly she had moved on. He reportedly believed there was still a chance for reconciliation, or at least that the dream of building their house and life together could come to fruition. The reality, however, was clear. Caryn had made a clean break and was embracing a future without him. Matt's children were aware of the situation but were reportedly encouraged to remain neutral. Zach and Tori's divorce and new relationships had already set a precedent for complicated family dynamics, and Matt wanted to avoid adding further tension. He focused on Roloff Farms, continuing projects that kept him busy and allowed him to channel his energy into something tangible. The farm had always been his anchor, and now it became a refuge from the emotional turbulence surrounding his personal life. Despite the quiet pain, sources say Matt has not closed himself off entirely. Friends suggest he is slowly learning to accept the reality of Caryn's marriage. He continues to maintain contact with her in a civil manner when necessary, especially when farm matters intersect with Caryn's previous involvement or the Roloff family brand. But the dynamic has shifted. Caryn's future is fully her own now, and Matt must navigate his life without her as a partner. Caryn and Mark, meanwhile, are reportedly thriving. They have been spending time traveling, exploring new hobbies, and integrating their lives without the shadow of reality television. Friends say Caryn feels liberated, empowered, and happy in ways that were impossible when tied to the public scrutiny of Roloff Farms. Her children from her previous marriage and Matt are still part of her life, but she is building her own family unit with Mark at the center of her personal world. Sources close to the couple suggest this is more than a rebound. Caryn and Mark's relationship is grounded in years of shared history, mutual understanding, and aligned values. Caryn reportedly feels that with Mark, she has finally found a partner who is patient, dependable, and truly invested in her happiness, not her image or social media presence. This has brought her a sense of peace that she has been seeking since leaving Matt. The secret wedding and the new life Caryn has created mark a definitive end to the chapter with Matt Roloff. Public appearances and social media may have suggested everything was fine, but the reality was very different. Caryn's decision to prioritize her own happiness and create a private, stable life shows a woman taking control of her narrative. Meanwhile, Matt remains at Roloff Farms, rebuilding his own life, focusing on projects and navigating the complexities of a family divided by ambition, expectation, and long-standing disputes. What happens next for the Roloffs remains uncertain. The family farm continues to be a point of focus, but the personal lives of its members are more complicated than ever. Karen Chandler has moved on, found love, and claimed her independence. Matt Roloff is left to process the past while building the future he wants on his own terms. The story of their relationship, once public and scrutinized by millions, now serves as a reminder of the challenges of balancing love, ambition, and family in a life constantly in the spotlight. After Caryn Chandler married Mark Harrington, life for the Roloff family entered a new and unfamiliar chapter. Caryn had finally stepped out of the shadow of Roloff Farms and the public eye, building a life entirely her own. For Matt Roloff, the shift was more complicated. Friends describe him as both heartbroken and frustrated. Heartbroken because the woman he had loved, planned a future with, and envisioned retiring alongside had moved on so fully. Frustrated because no matter how much he focused on the farm, the dream of shared happiness with Caryn had been irrevocably lost. Matt threw himself even more into the projects at Roloff Farms. The construction of new barns, renovations of rental properties, and the organization of the pumpkin season became not just work, but a coping mechanism. Each task offered a sense of control and purpose. With Caryn no longer by his side, the farm became his world, both sanctuary and prison. Friends describe long days filled with physical labor, meetings, and endless planning. But the nights were quiet, and the absence of Caryn's presence was a constant ache. The Roloff children watched these changes with mixed emotions. Some, like Zach, had already dealt with their own family upheaval and were cautious about engaging in additional drama. Others, like Jeremy, appear to be observing Matt from a distance, unsure how to approach him or where their loyalties should lie. Sources suggest that while Matt remained deeply connected to his children, tension lingered. Disagreements about the farm, finances, and media appearances continued to create small fractures within the family. Meanwhile, Caryn and Mark were thriving in their new life. Friends close to the couple describe a calm, structured, and loving environment. Caryn was no longer defined by the Roloff name or the expectations that came with it. She was free to live on her own terms, balancing family, friends, and the emerging life with Mark. The couple reportedly enjoys traveling together, exploring Arizona and other parts of the Pacific Northwest, often taking Caryn's grandchildren along to maintain strong family connections. Caryn's happiness, however, does not erase the past. Her relationship with Matt, while ended, continues to influence the family dynamic. Several sources indicate that Matt struggles with letting go entirely. While he publicly respects Caryn's decision and wishes her well, privately he wrestles with feelings of regret and what-ifs. There are times when he revisits memories of plans that were never realized: the dream house, trips to Arizona, shared holidays, and the sense of finality remains hard to accept. Matt has also had to confront the reality of the farm's future. With Caryn gone and some of the Roloff children uninterested in taking over, he faces a difficult decision: maintain the farm alone, find new partners, or begin the process of selling off portions. Publicly, he presents an image of confidence